Hey guys, welcome back, and we have another week of box office, so let's get into it. I want to thank all of the new people that have subbed to the channel, watching the content, and for, taking an interest in a very niche idea that is box office, as I think it gives a very good insight into how shows are doing and kind of keeping you ahead of the curve. So you know what's going to close, what's going to open, and how shows are actually doing. So & Juliet, last week 95%, this week 87%, 1,054,276 last week, and 875K this week. Again, & Juliet is kind of a show that's sort of struggling because they have announced stunt casting. I don't think it will close anytime soon, as in 5 months from now, but it could close next year. But I think, it's managing to now be doing decent. 875K is not by any means fantastic, but it's a lot better than the 6s and 7s that they were doing in September, and if they had continued to do that, then this would definitely be closing next year. The Louis Armstrong musical, I don't even care what it is. Last week, 91%, this week, 91.69. 612K last week, 661K this week. Pretty solid numbers for Louis Armstrong. Again, I think that this got pretty mixed to negative reviews from the critics, so I don't see it necessarily lasting until the Tonys. It could, though, if it continues to get to 7s and 8s, and if it can at least stay in the high 6s, I think it can make it. But if it continues to go down, and we'll see how it does in January and February. But for now, it's on a good track, but it's not done great business overall. Back to the Future is closing 91% last week, 68% this week, 910K last week, 674K this week. Terrible, and it's closing. Cabaret, I think, is still going to close at the end of March. 90% this week, 88% last week, and 1,064,231 last week, and 1,038,851K this week. Death Becomes Her continues to be the smash hit of the season. Truly one of the few new musicals in the past couple of years post-COVID to do fantastic. Last week, 98%. This week, 96%. Last week it had 6 performances. This week it had 8. So while the capacity was down, it went from 939K to 1,121,395 this week. Elf played to 93% last week and 90% this week. 276K to 510K. With an average ticket of $50, but it is a limited engagement. Hadestown, 98% to 95%, and 779K to 729K. Again, Hadestown is doing just decent. I don't think it's going to close in the next couple of months, but again, it has been holding on because of stunt casting since 2023. Otherwise, it would have closed at this point. But either way, Hadestown has been on life support, and eventually, stunt casting dries up, and that's when the show closes. Hamilton had one of its lowest weeks yet, and it's still pretty fantastic. Last week, 93%. This week, 95%. 1,772,958 last week, and 1,632,449 this week. Harry Potter had its worst week yet. 89% last week, 89% this week, 1,019,670 last week to this week's 900,528. Again, I think Harry Potter, these are not sustainable numbers, pure and simple. I know that they are reducing it to a 2-hour play, so maybe that will bring in more people. I did not know it was a 3-hour play because they cut it from 2 parts to 3 parts, trying to reduce costs. But I mean, if you've seen Harry Potter, you know how expensive it is. It's like 60 mil, something like that. So these are terrible numbers, and Harry Potter could very easily close this year if they wanted to. I mean, it's terrible numbers. Hell's Kitchen, 98% last week, and 1,436,360 to this week's 92%, and 1,358,818. So another fantastic week. Maybe Happy Ending, with amazing reviews out the gate, some of the best that a new musical has received, went from 84% to 89%, average ticket $65, which is still pretty low, and 297K to 458K. Now again, big improvement. If maybe Happy Ending can go up to like 5, 6, 7, it's in the clear, it's good. I know with Thanksgiving and Christmas, if it can, and here's the thing, it needs a 7 or an 8 in front of it for Thanksgiving or Christmas. It needs it in order to survive January and February. And maybe they can get a Ryan Murphy-esque producer who saved The Prom from closing, because I think this could be a big contender at the Tonys. Vista Social Club was poised to win Best Musical, or it's gotten a lot of hype. But I've also seen some people saying it's not that great from a book perspective. So maybe Happy Ending could win Best Musical. It could very well do that. It just needs to stick it out. 458K is kind of where these more, you know, fancy, Tony-esque, prestige, highbrow musicals can do fine at. Unlike Akimbo and A Strange Loop, maybe Happy Ending has a very expensive budget and much bigger production costs, and is a show that needs kind of to make that more medium 6, 7s, and 8s than Akimbo, which, you know, could, you know, survive at 4s and 5s because the highest that their costs were like 6s or 5s. So I do think that the high production value, which is incredible and amazing, has bit them in the butt when it comes to their operating costs, because if they had the Atlanta production set, I think they would have been able to have done better financially. I also wouldn't have opened the show in the fall. I wouldn't have done the lower ticket prices, because that never works. Because the capacity, you know, the numbers are clear to see to prove that. And I think shows opening in the fall are just not a smart move. I know Hamilton, Dear Evan Hansen, but those were brand musicals. Those were iconic pop cultural moments that existed beyond the theater realm. People will say, well, A Band's Visit, but A Band's Visit opened after that, and I think that the Best Musical had become its own brand, but I think that brand, along with independent movies, has been completely diminished by COVID, because independent movies and smaller musicals had just not done the numbers that they used to be doing, and maybe Happy Ending would have done better to open in the spring. I don't think anyone can argue with that. Moulin Rouge, it's gonna close. If it's not this year, it's gonna be next year. 97% last week, 1,110,115. This week, 90% and 955K. These are not sustainable numbers. They've only been there. They've only done good numbers because of stunt casting. If it wasn't for stunt casting, the show would have closed by now. They have done very good with Boy George and Aaron Tveit coming back. That I think they can make it. If they do close, it won't be until like early January of 2026. So it's not going anywhere like in the next year. Like, it's gonna be here a year from now, but 3 years from now, I don't think so. Six continues to do solid. 88% last week, 815K. This week, 87% and 757K. Suffs continues to have a very big box office post-closing boost, and I wonder if that's because of the election. Because obviously I think a lot of people were upset that Kamala Harris lost, and I'm wondering if this is their way of like having catharticness with it. And if it had these numbers out of the gate, it maybe would have not closed in January. Last week 98%, this week 96%, and 959K to 906K. Like, this show's doing better than like Back to the Future, or maybe Happy Ending, or you know, Harry Potter, for God's sakes. That's crazy. Sunset Boulevard continues to be a mega hit, 96% to 94%. 1,857,562 to 1,902,072. It's gonna break 2 mil, guys, and it is a limited engagement. And again, as I stated, what works are these highbrow concept, big star, limited engagement revivals. You know, it's a clear-cut winner, and Sunset Boulevard is once again proving that. Swept Away was doing okay. It opened to pretty mixed to negative critic responses. 82% last week, 80% this week, 434K last week, 426K this week. I suspect that it's going to close in February or January. It's not doing terrible. It'll do decent over Thanksgiving and Christmas, but it's in no way a contender for the Tonys, and that's the only way that Swept Away would, or any show that's like Swept Away-esque, would want to survive. So again, don't think this is going to be open for very long. Tammy Faye is going to close next month. I put 100K on it. Got amazingly terrible reviews. And 58% last week, 384K. This week, 62%, 374K. Terrible. Gatsby continues to do very well. 89% last week and 1,200,392. This week, 80% and 1,044,130. The Notebook, 87% and 674K to 80% capacity this week and 609K, and that is closing. The Outsiders continues to be a mega hit. Selling out and playing to 1,422,144 this week, 1,408,500 last week. Waterfree Elephants is ending pretty mediocre with 78% last week and 73% this week, and 801K to 790K. I think maybe Happy Ending is the one show that I want to succeed. I hope it succeeds, and if you haven't seen it, go and see it. I don't know if this means anything, but I know people on the Reddits and the message boards who were not initially wanting to see it took a chance on it and they've loved it. So hopefully maybe Happy Ending can be the band's visit, the spring awakening, the Kimberly Akimbo of this season, because it deserves it. We deserve it as fans. But yeah, anyways, those are my thoughts. Like, sub, and comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.